council meeting of February 2nd, 2021 is called to order. Let's all stand for the pledge and I'll lead tonight. Everybody else can turn their mics off. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Okay, Donna, will you do the roll call, please?
I sure will. Councilmember Bode.
Here.
Councilmember Feast. Here. Councilmember Schmidt.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Inesco.
Here.
Councilmember McDowell.
Present.
And Mayor Dorsey.
Here. All right. Does the council have any late changes to the agenda? All right. At this time, I would like to remind members of the public that they can make comments during the public comment period, as well as on any items listed on the business agenda or action agenda. When making a public comment, you will need to state your full name and whether you reside within the city limits, within Mason County, or reside elsewhere. Option number one, you can join the Zoom meeting by clicking on the link that is displayed on the city's webpage. The link is listed on the agendas and minutes page under the tab that says more. Option number two, email city manager Jeff Knighton. And number three, call Jeff's office phone. Both the email address and phone number are displayed on the screen of the Mason Web TV's streaming video. All right. The council members, do we have a council members that have a board report? Council reports?
No, I'll have an annual report for the Housing Behavioral Health Advisory Board next meeting. It just was approved.
All right. Anyone? Go ahead.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take the opportunity to actually recognize an organization this evening during my council report. And would you allow me to do that?
Sure.
All right. So it's always exciting to see a packed house at our proceedings tonight. So thank you, everybody, members of the public, council members, for a quick recognition here. Tonight, I just want to call attention to a group of leaders in our community who've been doing some incredible work to help people in need throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Their mission statement reads, "We work to make Mason County a sanctuary for all people who call this community home, to feel safe, welcome, and hopeful for the future. We recognize that by elevating those of us who are marginalized and or at risk, we all rise up, together we elevate." Elevate Mason County was recently featured in the December 31st issue of the Mason County Journal. Elevate Mason County is responsible for establishing an immigrant relief fund and help fill the gaps in areas where help is falling short throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. I was struck to see how much money this grassroots campaign has raised and put into the hands of those struggling. Over $15,000 has been raised, and I believe roughly 50 or more families have been helped throughout the COVID-19 pandemic in our immigrant community. It's a great feeling to see our community rise up, organize, and help each other when times are tough. That's what Shelton's all about, and that's what I love about living here. So I'm proud to recognize Coco Chang, Ellen Short Sanchez, Stacey Gilkison, and Amanda Eichelberger, and the team of volunteers and advocates of Elevate Mason County. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Joe. Anyone else have a report? Seeing none, we'll move on then. I don't really have anything to share this time either. All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as published?
I move to accept the consent agenda as published.
Second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries. Now we're going to move on to presentations. Our first one, our first presentation this evening has to do with stormwater rates. Public Works Director, Administrative Manager, no, Public Works Administrative. Where is she? Oh, there she is. Manager Brooke Yells, introduce our speaker from FCS Group.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Deputy Mayor and council members. Tonight we have the first of 3 stormwater presentations that FCS Group is going to be presenting. I'll let John and Toggy with FCS Group introduce themselves in a bit. As you are aware, we engaged with them in 2019 to start this process, and we've had a few bumps in the road for this year with everything going on, but we're on a really good path now. Following the presentation, FCS Group, as well as Public Works Director Jay Harris and myself will be available for any questions that you guys may have. And now I'm going to turn it over to FCS Group.
Thank you very much, Brooke. So I'm John Ghilarducci. I'm a principal with FCS Group and the principal on this study. I'll lead us off, and then Toggy Acker will present the bulk of the analytical results. Toggy's been the project manager on the project and has done most of the heavy lifting with City of Shelton staff. So Toggy, you can go to the next slide, please. A little bit of orientation. Brooke and Jay were with you in December to talk about stormwater rate structures. Tonight, our topic will be the revenue requirement. The revenue requirement is all about how much money do we need from stormwater rates in order to meet all the financial obligations of the stormwater utility. The city is under a new NPDES, that's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, and has to design its program to meet those permitting requirements. So that's a big part of this. We're also going to introduce you to a new rate structure, which should help mitigate some of the impact of the rate increases you're going to see a little later. On February 16th, we'll be back to talk about a deeper dive on that proposed new rate structure and an approach to rate credits for those folks who are doing things on site to manage their own impacts. So that rate structure discussion is more about, okay, we know how much money we need. How do we best recover it from our customers? That's the February 16th discussion. And then we'll also be back again in March to talk about general facilities charges. But our focus tonight and on the 16th is on the ongoing stormwater rates. So the way we've laid this out tonight, I'll go through some background on the utility and Shelton stormwater program. Toggy will walk us through the revenue requirement results and some of the basics of that analysis. Then I'll come back and talk about the proposed rate structure change and then some next steps. So the city has a fairly complex stormwater system. Some of the highlights are shown here. Over 1,700 catch basins and inlets, almost 500 manholes, ditches, culverts, main lines, the diversion pipe. It's a system that requires ongoing maintenance to function well and effectively drain the city in a storm event, and also to manage water quality. So we could show you some examples on the next slides of some of the system highlights. The city protects sensitive water bodies, obviously local streams, and then Puget Sound in the form of Hammersley Inlet and Oakland Bay. And as I mentioned, it needs ongoing repair and maintenance. These are some of the consequences in a storm event which can overwhelm the system. And often that's due to inadequately maintained or deferred maintenance on some of the capital infrastructure, or possibly there's replacement needed or new infrastructure to prevent these types of incidents. We have some more pictures here. Another flooded street, proactive maintenance, keeps that system functioning so that these events don't happen, or when they do, they're not as bad. Sometimes new infrastructure is needed. You'll see capital funding as part of the needs of the program in order to repair, replace, and at times bring in new infrastructure to manage stormwater. So the program is pretty comprehensive. As I mentioned, it manages water quality into the streams and into the sound, the quantity of runoff by detaining it or retaining it and then releasing it over time, so those peak storm events don't overwhelm the system. Public education and outreach is a requirement of the permit, so the city does a lot of educating the population on the stormwater system, what not to do. Repair and maintenance is funded by the stormwater rates and through the program. Capital projects, inspection services, construction, sites have to be inspected, and post-construction, they need to be inspected to make sure that they are complying with regulations. The NPDES program, which is predominantly about water quality, customer billing and administration associated with the rates, and then monitoring to see what the effects of all this work has been on or have been on receiving waters. So this is all funded through rates, through ongoing rates. And so the city's existing rate structure is summarized here. For single family residences and duplexes, it's a flat $12.10 per month. There is a discount available for qualifying low-income seniors. And then for all other developed property in the city, we're labeling that non-SFR, non-single family residential. So that includes commercial, multifamily, like apartments, government facilities, industrial customers. Those folks are subject to the schedule that you see on the bottom in that bottom table. If they have less than 5,000 impervious square feet on the parcel, so that's rooftop, parking lot, developed surface that prevents water from perking, they are charged at less than 5,000 square feet, $22.70 per month. As the impervious square footage goes up, the charge per parcel goes up. It's effectively capped for very large developed parcels. And one of the things that we noticed is as those ranges go up, the rate does not increase linearly. So it's a little bit of a more gradual escalation in the charges per parcel than the amount of impervious surface area. The city has not raised the rate since 2009. Had increases been in place for inflation over that time, the current rate right now would be over $15. That's just sort of to orient yourself to where the rate is now and how buying power has decreased over that time. Tagi.
Thank you, John. The next section will be covering the revenue requirement for the city's stormwater utility. And before we get into the actual results, we did want to provide a little bit of background into utility rate making. Essentially, what we're trying to do here is set utility rates to cover the cost of providing service. Those typically come in two types of costs. You do have operating costs and you do have capital costs. Operating costs tend to be a little bit more regular and predictable. These are your staff salaries and benefits, repair and maintenance, some of that education and outreach that John mentioned earlier, inspections, engineering, and as well as street sweeping. Capital costs really depends on how many projects are in the city's capital plan, and we will get to that in a few slides, but depending on how many projects the city has taken on in any given year, that can be a little bit of an up and down expense from year to year. So for the city's utility, how much revenue is needed to cover the costs? It's really a function of three key items: fiscal policies up there at the top, and then we layer on funding your 2021 operating budget, as well as an additional FTE, which we'll get to what that FTE is for in a couple of slides. And then in addition to those operating costs, we do make sure that the revenue requirement plan provides funding for the 2021 through 2026 capital improvement program, sometimes referred to as a CIP. And just wanted to note that the stormwater utility does not currently have any outstanding debt. So three items: fiscal policies, funding your operations, and funding the capital program. All three combine to equal your annual revenue needs for the utility. So we'll dive into each of those items in a little bit more detail. First is the fiscal policies. We'll be talking about operating reserves as well as capital reserves. First, operating reserves. This is essentially in place as to provide working capital to provide for daily expenses, as there is some variance in when revenues come in and when you need to pay your bills. So it's good to have some sort of liquidity cushion there to help handle the day-to-day ups and downs. The current city target policy is roughly 20% of operating expenses. So based on this year's budget, it's roughly $260,000 for an operating reserve minimum target. The second reserve here is the capital reserve. This is in place in addition to the operating reserve, there to help meet emergency repairs, unexpected capital projects, or you might have some cost overruns on part of your planned capital program. And we're recommending that that target be based on a 1% of the existing assets in the stormwater utility. That's roughly $60,000. So on a combined basis, these policies would be about $320,000. As far as stormwater utility costs, I did want to highlight here the 2020 budget compared to the 2021 budget. They're very similar in total amounts, but in the middle you can see here 2020 year-end estimates, pretty low compared to the operating budget for 2020. And that's due to some reduced operating and maintenance expenditures. For example, some deferred hires due to the pandemic and some cost-saving measures that city staff put in place. But 2021 budget more or less mirrors the 2020 budget. And we'll be putting together a funding plan in the next couple of slides that helps fund this operating budget. You can see here that existing rate revenues on an annual basis, it's roughly $765,000. So there is that funding gap here of what rates currently support and what they need to support to cover the operating budget, and then the capital plan we'll get to in a couple of slides. I did want to circle back to the additional FTE planned to come online in 2022. We're assuming roughly $100,000 per year for the salaries and benefits combined. And this FTE will help perform on-site inspections of private and city storm drainage systems, as well as be a stormwater specialist, will help handle and administer the MPDES permitting requirements. On this slide, a 6-year capital plan listed by project. You can see there, 2021 capital fairly minimal, but from that point on, averages about $250,000 per year. And you can see the different types of projects here in different areas of the city shown on a year-by-year basis. So when we put that all together, we can develop a revenue requirement forecast. The stacked bars here are the financial obligations of the utility. The darker bar on the bottom is the annual operating and maintenance expense. Based on the 2021 operating budget, there's a bump there for an additional FTE, and then we're more or less projecting annual inflationary adjustments to the city's existing costs. On top of that, in the gold portion of the stacked bars, is a rate that would be dedicated to capital projects in order to fund the 6-year capital program. And so those financial obligations are compared with the revenue at current rates. You can see that there's a funding gap here above and beyond that revenue generated by current rates that would need to be generated through some sort of rate adjustment. In total, roughly $1.8 million of annual revenue would be needed to fund the city's operating budget, the additional FTE in 2022, as well as to cash fund the 6-year capital plan. Just as an example, we wanted to show what it would take to fund the revenue requirement under the city's existing rate structure. You recall that John walked you through the existing rate structure here. Single family pays $12.10 per month as of the current effective January 1st. And then depending on the range of impervious area for non-single family residential parcels would pay anywhere from $23 per month up to a cap of $284 per month. So if you were to fund the revenue requirement on this page, effective July 1st of 2021, the monthly fees per parcel would need to be as shown here in this middle column. So single family residential would pay up to $27.59 per month. And then the range for non-single family residential parcels would range from more or less $50 to $650 per month, depending on the impervious area on a non-single family residential parcel. And as John mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we are proposing an alternative rate structure that would result in some different rates for single family and these non-single family customers. And he'll talk about that in the next couple of slides here.
Thanks, Tagi. So the rate that you saw there for a single family residence of almost $28 a month would be among the highest in the region, as you probably surmised. One of the reasons for that, and we'd like to offer at least a partial solution. When I was describing the city's existing rate structure on previously, I talked about how as the amount of impervious surface area goes up for the non-residential customers, the rate doesn't go up proportionally, and that a highest rate effectively caps charges for the city's largest customers. That has the effect of creating two pies like you see here. The revenue coming from the single family residential customer class makes up about half of the city's revenue from stormwater rates. If you look at the pie on the right, single family residential has only 30% of the impervious surface area in the city. So they are only a fraction of the actual developed area, yet they are generating half of the revenue. So the rate approach that we're going to describe here, we're calling it the ESU structure. And now we've got a graphic on the next page that will help. What we do is charge non-residential developed property for their actual measured impervious surface area at the same rate we charge single family residences. So what I mean by that is we still charge single family uniformly. They would be charged for one ESU or equivalent service unit. And that ESU value is based on the average amount of impervious surface area for single family residences in Shelton. That's about 2,900 square feet of impervious. So single family residences pay a single monthly charge. Duplexes pay 2 times that because they're effectively two dwelling units side by side. For all other developed property, we would charge the measured impervious surface area as a multiple of 2,900 impervious square feet. So if a commercial property is 14,400 square feet of impervious surface area, there are 5 equivalent service units. If they're 29,000, they're 10 equivalent service units, and they would pay the base rate times 10 or times 5 based on their actual measured impervious. So that has the effect of balancing out those pie charts. So now single family residential would only be paying 30% and non-residential would be paying the rest. And the rate, the calculated rate can come down from that nearly $28. So if you see at the bottom of this chart, first of all, you see the column on the right. Those were the rates applied, the increase, the revenue requirement increase applied to the current rate structure. Down at the bottom of this table is the charge for an equivalent service unit using that ESU approach. So for a single family residence, that monthly rate would be closer to $17 rather than 28 using the ESU structure. There will be some non-residential customers who pay substantially more based on their developed area and their impervious surface area. This is the industry standard approach. So it won't be, it won't be a shock when compared to other cities, other stormwater programs in the region, but it will be a different approach for the city of Shelton. So this is where some of these results would place the city among comparable jurisdictions. And really, I should caveat this. This shouldn't matter because everybody's needs, stormwater systems are different, but understanding that it's almost always of interest. You see sort of the range of rates in the region from Lakewood at a little over $10 a month, up to Newcastle and Snoqualmie, well over $20, and where the city of Shelton's rate would be without the rate structure change if that percentage increase was just applied to the existing rate structure. And these rates are a little bit different because they include the utility tax, Shelton's do, than the numbers you saw in previous slides. Under the ESU structure, you see in about the middle of the pack there, Shelton would be at about $17 a month, and then the current rate structure there shown as well at $12.71. So I mentioned we will be back on February 16th in 2 weeks to talk more about the rate structure change and what that might mean, how we develop that information, and really get at that issue of equitably recovering these costs in that proposed structure. The city still has alternatives, of course, to stick with the existing rate structure or make that move. We'll also talk about a proposed approach to rate credits and provide you some sample bills so you can see what impacts on individual customers might look like if the city were to move to this proposed rate structure. On March 2nd, we'll be back to talk about general facilities charges. These are the one-time fees paid by new development as it develops to try and recover the costs of growth from growth and help pay for capital projects that are needed. That's all of our prepared material. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, John. Do we have any questions for John?
I have one. Mayor?
Yeah, I hear you, Kathy. I just can't see you.
Okay. So, having impervious versus pervious, does that adjust the rate any, is that important?
So, yeah, yes, it is for a non-residential customer. So if you picture a commercial development, a strip mall, for example, they would be charged based on the measured size of the parking lot and the building footprint. If they had landscaped area or lawn, they would not be charged for that. They would only be charged for the hard surfaces, those measured hard surfaces. For single family residences, we focus only on the average and charge them uniformly. And the reason is because it's so costly to measure all the single family residential impervious surface area. And then the city also then has to track it from year to year. And what other cities have found is it's just not worth that additional effort because the rates don't end up changing that much among single family residences. Where the big differences are among the non-residential customers.
So, John, so if we encourage new building, new construction or whatever, and encourage them to do pervious where the water goes down, right? Is that pervious where the water goes down through the pavement?
Pervious pavement for,
Yes.
so that's really a policy choice that the city can make. Many cities will provide some amount, a small rate credit. The problem that we've heard is that unless that pervious pavement is maintained on a regular basis, it ceases to function well. And so that's been one of the issues with pervious pavement. And I'm already out of my depth here as a finance guy, but that's what we hear from other programs.
All right.
Just speaking of incentives or discounts, was any of our existing incentives or discounts considered when formulating the rate structure that you just presented?
Yes. So we had those summarized. If it's okay, we'll come back and talk about that more in depth on the 16th, the city's existing credit programs and how those might be changed or improved.
Yeah, no, that'd be great to just to making sure, and I'm sure you guys have thought about that in all of your planning. It just, if we do offer incentives or credits, does that throw that a revenue plan off? And if so, how considerably? So, but thanks. I'll look forward to that.
Yes, we do take that into account in our calculations. It's a great question.
All right, is that it? Looks like that's it. Okay, for our next presentation, we have Avi from Equity Bluff with information about the workforce housing project.
Is this working, the share screen?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Every once in a while, technology works. Beautiful thing. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting us back to talk in some more detail on the proposed workforce housing project and the process and path moving forward. This is meant to build upon our previous presentation and drill down in a little more detail on a couple of elements of the project without trying to be too repetitive from what we talked about last time. So with that, we did just go back and added a little more information on the average salaries of teachers, police officers, firefighters in the area to show that, as you can see here, the incomes needed to afford the homes we will be delivering are exactly within the strike zone of folks that are our intended end user audience. So just to drill down a little more on that. Next slide talks about a development timeline in a lot more detail. We hope, expect, plan, pray to execute our development agreement and purchase and sale agreement with the city in the first quarter of this year. That will kick off our pre-development planning process in earnest. Not to repeat myself too much, but to reiterate, we're at the beginning of the beginning. Signing the the development agreement and the purchase and sale agreement starts the process. It's not even the beginning of the end. So it is the very early stages. We need to do a lot of work with our civil engineers, our architects, our environmental assessment people to really drill down to see what is on the land intended to be developed for this before developing any final site plans or detailed development plans. And we can't do that until we hit a handshake with the city that says the city thinks there is a need for this kind of a project targeting these incomes, and that this land is a potential vehicle for addressing that need. So after we sign the purchase and sale agreement and after we sign the development agreement, we will then start the very intensive pre-development planning that will run from now all the way through June, July. And we will get that data in hand, develop a very detailed site plan with input from the city to then start the multiple processes that will bring that site plan with all that data that has been collected back in front of the public for both the environmental review and approval, the SEPA approvals, and traffic impact studies and approvals on the traffic side. So there will be two different public approval processes that will take place after we sign a development agreement and after we sign a purchase and sale agreement, before any development plan receives any final approvals. And when we begin that process, when we come back in front of the public, in front of all of you in this third quarter of this year, we will have had the benefit of our traffic impact analysis. We will have the benefit of our environmental impact analysis so that we can give you much more informed and much more better data to analyze the impact of this project. We don't have that now, but we can't get it without knowing there's at least potentially a deal to be had. If that all goes according to plan, we would anticipate actually breaking ground on the project in March or April of next year, with homes then being delivered over a 2-year process and building out the full community by late summer, early fall of 2024. So just not to repeat myself, but this is the beginning of the beginning. We got a long road ahead of us, assuming this continues to move forward. And there'll be multiple opportunities. We'll be back in front of you, getting public input and making sure that we meet the need that is identified by the city. Drilling down a little more on the use of the soft second financing to facilitate these kinds of projects. There are housing production trust funds that are used by cities, counties, and states throughout the country routinely in a manner similar to what we're proposing here. We have used housing production trust funds in multiple locations across the country to produce workforce housing ourselves, so that what we're proposing as the capital stack here with the use of this seller financing is essentially equivalent to the housing production trust funds that are already used across the country in a similar manner. Just to reiterate the promises that we are making as a part of this project going forward, in my mind, these promises are a floor, not a ceiling. And that we know that for there to be a project, we need to do these things or there's no deal. What we might find out as we go through the environmental review process and the traffic impact process, that we might need to do more than what's outlined here to make the project viable and make it work. And if that is the result of those studies, then we will have to make a decision as a development team whether to provide those additional benefits in order to make sure we do mitigate the environmental impacts and traffic impacts, or give up on the project and say, hey, it was worth a shot, but it turns out there's much more here than we thought there would be. We can't make the numbers work. But that's a decision that will be made down the road once we have that analysis. We know that without doing the things we are already talking about in front of you, along the lines of the pedestrian trail, the roundabout, delivering the homes to be affordable to the intended incomes of the households we're targeting, there won't be a deal, period. And we know that. And everyone knows that going in. We were asked to provide some additional pictures and renderings of what the community would look like when done. So here's some renderings of the exterior street grid, interior finishes, what the exteriors of the homes look like, the different models. One thing I think we did mention this last time, but it's worth repeating. We're going to make sure we have multiple building types, multiple colors, multiple facades, so that when you drive down the street, you're not looking at a cookie cutter image of the same exact house in a never ending row of homes. That doesn't look good. It's not desirable. We don't want it. And we're going to make sure that our community looks like it has a good residential feel to it and it's not cookie cutter. Some more interiors, just to give you a sense of the finishes of the homes that we'll be delivering. And then we did want to call out 2 case studies of projects that we are currently working on across the country that we felt are similar to this, where we partnered with a local jurisdiction to leverage land that they had available to deliver housing that they felt was a need in their community. The first example is a project we're currently under construction on in Spartanburg, South Carolina. There we're utilizing 18 acres donated by the city of Spartanburg, along with $1.5 million trust fund loan from the city to deliver what will be 360 homes. It'll be a mix of townhouses and apartments. A key difference between that project and this one is they donated the land without any kind of seller financing. Here, we're not asking for a donation. We don't expect a donation. The city is going to sell us, under the proposed development agreement, the land at its appraised value. It'll just then provide a seller loan so that we can make the numbers work, but you'll earn an interest rate on that loan and it will be repaid over time out of cash flow in a similar manner as other affordable housing trust funds are used throughout the country. Second example of a similar project we're working with another jurisdiction right now is in Petersburg, Virginia. There we are redeveloping an abandoned historic elementary school and a number of vacant lots around that school to deliver a mix of senior apartments and workforce housing, single family detached homes. Once again, in that case, the city is donating both the school and the land into the deal to help make the numbers work and make the project feasible. Unlike in this case where you're not donating the land, you are selling it at its appraised value. But so there's 2 examples right here where we spent similar to what's happening here in Shelton. We spent a year working with both Spartanburg and Petersburg on studying the feasibility of even attempting a project like this before we ever started going down the path of a purchase and sale agreement, a development agreement, and all those things. In both those cases, we have had multiple public hearings since the projects were first unveiled. We've had multiple votes on zoning and purchase and sale agreements these 2 meetings we've had with you over the last 4 weeks is the very beginning of the process, just like we had with them. But there was a year-long path beyond that before we actually, in one case, broke ground. In the other case, we're on the verge of doing that in the next few months. We also wanted to include some pictures of finished projects that have been delivered that are workforce housing, targeting the types of households that this project will target. These are all many years old now. They look just as good now as they did when we first delivered them. The one in the middle is the one I like talking about the most. It's the historic Whitelaw Apartments in Washington, D.C. When it was first built, it was the first hotel in D.C. that would accept African-American customers. So every single major African-American musician, politician from the 1920s all the way through the 1950s, if they came through DC, they stayed in the Whitelaw Hotel. Over time, it became run down and became a flop house, and then was abandoned. There was a fire that decimated it. A nonprofit that we do a lot of work with and partner with on many deals did eventually take it over, and using the same types of tax credit programs we're using here, brought it back to its former glory and restored. The thing I love the most about this project is they restored the 1920s ballroom. So now you can go in that apartment today and see the historic ballroom as it once looked to Duke Ellington. And they put an exhibit in there that anyone can walk through talking about the history of the hotel itself. The hotel was only even created because 2,000 families around the neighborhood bought individual shares of the hotel to get it built in the first place because they had nowhere for their friends or family to stay when they would come to visit. And you see this picture as you drive by today, it's in an area of the city that's gentrified enormously over the last 15 years. Our workforce housing apartments rent for about $900 a month. And literally across the street in a building that looks no different than ours, the same apartment rents for $1,800 a month. That's the kind of quality that we deliver in these workforce housing projects. Just to reiterate that, if you reduce a household's housing costs, they have more disposable income to spend in their wider community. in their shops, in the restaurants when they do reopen, when COVID is over, God willing, joining the local YMCA and all the other things that are the lifeblood of a community. Some folks have also asked how we even came to Shelton in the first place, and I have to thank our partner, the Steel Joel, who's on the line for that. He's done a number of new markets tax credit projects throughout Washington State, working with a number of different YMCAs, including the Shelton Y, on financing their deals. As a part of his efforts with the Shelton Y, he learned about the workforce housing need here. Joel and I have been friends for longer than either one of us will care to admit, and he knows we do a lot of work in the space. So once the need was identified, he brought us in to see if we can help make something happen. And with that, I have droned on probably long enough that half the audience is asleep, so I will leave it there for questions.
All right, thank you, Avi. Do we have any questions for Avi? Or should we move on to public comment?
I have a question.
Kathy?
Yes. Talking about buying shares, can you explain that a little bit to us?
That was unique to that particular project in Washington, D.C. It was just the
Okay.
genesis of that historic hotel. The neighborhood passed a hat, and let me just go back to the picture of it. This one here. And when it was first built in 1912, just individual families were shareholders in the hotel and helped buy individual shares to help get it built.
Okay.
It's an amazing story.
All right.
What happens if somebody qualifies and moves in and then they get promoted or they get a new job? Do they salary out of the place?
That's a very good question, and the short answer is no. If you qualify when you move in, you stay.
Okay.
It does not punish your success, right? No one wants that.
So if a single person moves in that qualifies and gets married,
We measure the day you move in, and then hey, if you qualify, you qualify. Now, obviously, to exaggerate, if you move in, you income qualify, 2 years later, you murder somebody in your house, right? Well, then of course it will be right. But from an income perspective, if you qualify the day you move in, then you qualify.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Anyone else have something for Avi?
Deidre's got her hand up and then I'll go next if that's okay.
Okay, Deidre, I can't see you.
Thanks, Megan, and thank you, Mayor.
There you are.
Could you just speak a little bit to why the decision to focus on 4-bedroom, single-family housing, particularly for this project? I know that's one of the things that has been discussed is most of the other projects are apartment buildings, townhouses, or multi-use. So if you could speak to that a bit, I would appreciate it.
That's where it seems the demand and the need seems to be greatest for 3 and 4 bedroom single family homes. There does not seem to be a lot of supply available in the area to these families in this situation. As discussed, we're in the early stages. We don't have a final site plan yet. We don't have a final development matrix or mix yet. I'm sure we'll be tweaking as we go with your input and as we get more data. But the initial market study we did commission and do have in hand shows there's just none of this product type available, affordable to these households now in the area.
Can you, is it
Megan, do you
okay?
have something?
Can you describe the long-term plan to make sure that how will the environment be maintained and kept up? We've got a lot of community statements around, our citizens don't want to see a slum, end up in our town. So can you address that? What that looks like? And then also, can you talk about the opportunity for individuals, families to possibly have the opportunity to purchase, at least to purchase in the future, and what that might look like?
So to answer the first question on common area maintenance, that's our job as the developer and the owner and the property manager. We will be maintaining all common areas. The families will have a 2 to 3 foot, 4 foot plot right around the home. That if they wanted to plant a garden, they'd be able to do that. But the wider area, if you look at the pictures, the big stretches of grass and the streetscape, all that is on us to maintain. We do that for 2 reasons. A, we want to have a nice community that is desirable. And B, financially, we kind of have to do that because if we can't keep these units leased, we can't pay our mortgage and then we lose our shirt and our kids' college fund. So we have every financial incentive in the world to make sure that this is maintained at a high quality and stays leased up. In this particular case, because of the element of seller financing that we are requesting and is assumed to be part of the capital stack, you guys will actually be able to enforce community standards on us through the mortgage. It's not just take our word for it and pray we do what we said we do. You can build into your seller financing to us hooks to make sure that we do follow through, because you're going to be you'll have a mortgage on us. So it's not just take our word and then when we close, you never hear from us again. The nature of the tax credit program that we're using to deliver these homes to make sure that they are affordable to the workforce housing that we are targeting requires that they do stay rental. That's not a developer choice. That is the core definition of the federal tax credit program we are using to deliver the community. So they got to be rental when we deliver.
All right, Avi, I had a,
Wait, Eric, you're on mute. Were you trying to say something?
I'm on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I just said, would you have a local office here in town after they're built?
Definitely. We do on-site management. And we are planning a clubhouse type leasing office within the community itself. So there will be a leasing office on site that will have our on-site property management. No, there is no other way to do this right other than that. So yes, we will have an office right in the community.
Thank you.
And once again, and I do apologize. Normally, this kind of a project, we know is big and consequential. And normally, you would have met me in person a bunch of times already as we're proposing this. I do apologize for that not having happened in the last 9 months. I think you all excuse us for not being there because of COVID, but I acknowledge this is not the right or normal way to launch a project via Zoom calls and PowerPoints. When COVID is over and we are able to travel, hopefully soon, we'll be there in person and we can break bread properly.
Avi, I had a question for you. Megan's already touched on one of them, and actually Eric did too. But I'm assuming by the photos or whatever that I'm looking at, there's a strip of grass alongside the road and the sidewalk. I'm assuming that there will be no street parking.
That is the current assumption. That being said, we don't have a site plan yet. We don't have a traffic plan yet. So that might change as we talk. Going back to the development timeline, you get into here,
right?
We will have very detailed plans, specs, assumptions that we'll bring back in front of everybody and really drill down on. My assumption right now is there won't be on-street parking, but I can't make that promise either way because A, we don't have the data, and B, we don't have your input.
Okay, but that's also part of a stormwater design, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right.
Yes, it is.
And you've already said you have on-site management.
Yep.
And I was asked today if there's a place closer than, Washington, DC or Virginia that we could look at, 5 or 10 years old or whatever, however old it is. Is there
Not
anything
that
like
we've
that?
done.
Yeah.
I'm showing my East Coast roots, right? But there are plenty of other workforce housing projects that have been done in Washington State. We could identify and point out to you to go look at. We'd be lying to you if we said we did them. And I was focusing on something.
In Washington State?
Mr. Mayor, in fact, if you drive down I-5 right now through Tumwater, you'll see a large apartment complex that's being built there on the left-hand side across from the Toyota dealership there by Tumwater High School. It's a pretty packed in there apartment complex, but that's a workforce housing development that is using these types of credits as well. A lot of the apartment complex, those larger complexes that you're seeing, you know, in like Thurston County and whatnot, those are all funded with these types of credits. Now, I think it's real important for us to realize that that's not, I don't think a lot of us want to see, you know, huge apartment complex right up against our main arterials and whatnot. So I think that's something for us to take into consideration. And then I'm going to jump in for another question since I already grabbed it. Hey, what happens, you know, the plan says 200 to 400 homes, but, you know, we're just starting these conversations and, you know, this is a very, very coveted piece of land that has definitely caused a lot of concern from our citizens. And so what does happen here? You know, what happens if you do partner with us and we get in there and what the citizens see is not something that they're interested in doing? What happens then?
A fair question.
Like, you know, like the SEPA and stuff, you know, when we really do see what's going on, you know, what if we do have an endangered species up on top of one of those trees? What happens?
Sure, and that's, I agree. That's one of the reasons why I keep saying don't get fixated on the sample site plan we've shown, because we have not done the environmental impact statement. We don't know if there is a bald eagle reserve in the middle of the land. I'm viewing this first step of us hopefully getting to a development agreement and purchase and sale agreement as it's a handshake. It's you saying in good faith, look, we know there's a need for this housing, and we know that if you can wind up delivering roughly what you're talking about, we want that. And we are acknowledging in return there are certain baseline things we have to deliver, or you're not going to wind up doing the deal in the end, like the roundabout, like the pedestrian bikeways, like making sure we don't have a negative environmental impact, right? It's a handshake. There is always the chance, to your point, that as we get deeper into it, we find out the deal isn't feasible for whatever environmental or traffic reason, but at least we'll know that. And it won't be for a lack of trying or a lack of intent. That has not happened to us previously. We've never had a deal fall apart after we got past the handshakes, because we are pretty good at doing initial due diligence and initial review to make sure that the fundamentals do seem to work. But I totally acknowledge there is a chance that between now and May, this winds up becoming not feasible because we all find out something we didn't know before. But what we are relying on is the good faith of the deal isn't going to die because you change your mind and no longer like workforce housing, if we get past the development agreement.
Avery, where did the people park their cars? There's no garages, there's no on-street parking. So where do the cars? Oh, there's a driveway. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Forgive me.
All right, Eric, go ahead.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Eric.
I'm always on mute. How do you decide the rent increases? Are they always just 20% below market value, or do you have a schedule where you raise rents?
No, rent increases we underwrite at 2% annual increases once someone moves in.
Okay. And then I don't know if Jeff is going to explain the 15-year development agreement versus the 30 years in the contract. People have been asking me. So they're 30-year guaranteed workforce housing rentals or 15 years?
So typically these have 30-year at a minimum affordability covenants on them.
Okay.
That's a minimum.
Okay.
we view it as in perpetuity. Like if you go back to just some of the examples I did list of other projects we work with and nonprofits we work with, the Jubilee Housing portfolio of over 400 units in Adams Morgan and DC, they've been affordable / workforce, depending on which building, since the 1970s. Whitelaw Apartments has been in managed control since 1992. I mean, this is not, in our mind, they will stay affordable to the workforce that they are intended to serve in perpetuity. That's the goal. Because it is so hard to create this type of housing that is affordable to the workforce that you're targeting. It takes so much effort and it's so hard to get it done the first time. It seems a waste to then let it go.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, just,
Deidre has her hand up.
yeah, just a point of clarification. So I'll be on the second slide, that actually states that the homes remain affordable to households for at least 40 years. Is that just a typo that it should be 30 as in the remaining paperwork?
No, and in many jurisdictions we work in, it's 40 or 50 or 60 years. There are some jurisdictions that even put you can't do in perpetuity from a legal perspective. So they put in, 70 years. We're going to live with whatever time period you want, because we're viewing that as once again, the floor, not the ceiling. The reality is the way this program works, because the initial compliance period for the tax credits is 15 years. And what you typically wind up doing is you reissue the tax credits at year 15, because after 15 years, the project needs some work. Any project after 15 years needs some work. So you wind up reselling the credits at year 15 to pay for the renovations that are needed. Well, when you do that, you reset the clock. So if you had set a 40-year clock up front, you run for 15 years, now you have 25 years left. But when you resyndicate the credits, you've reset the 40-year clock on it again. So if you always keep issuing the credits on it, you always keep resetting the 40 years, they're never going to be lost to a full-blown market project. And no one wants that. I don't want that. I don't think you guys want that. So we'll paper it as 30, 40, 50 years, however you want to. The reality is, just going back to the projects that have been around a long time, we're associated with projects that have been workforce housing in the most gentrified areas of DC since the 1970s. So,
Anyone else from the council? If not, we'll move on to, hold on, Mr. McCoy, we're getting to you. All right. General public comment. Donna, do we have anybody interested in making comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have several people on a list already, so I'm going to add Dean McCoy to my list, and then we'll go from there. So the first person that I have is Steve Whitehouse.
Todd Fagg also has had his hand up. We add him to the list.
Okay, Todd, I see you now. I will add you.
And Mike Fox as well, I'm seeing.
And Mark Kamen.
Hey, Avi, I think you're still sharing your screen. There we go.
Okay, we got your back, Don. We got
Thank
Brent
you.
Dilly.
Now, just a minute.
Yeah.
I just added Mike Fox and Mark Kamen. And who else did you say, Megan?
We got Brent Dilly.
Okay,
We got Jim Morrell.
Jim, okay.
We got Julie. I'm going to go with Lyles because I've seen a Julie Lyles. Julie, is that right?
And there's an Ed
Nope.
Ryder.
Julie Tucson, or it's going to be Mark Tucson.
Mark Tucson.
Okay, so let's stop right here and we're going to get Steve Whitehouse. Where is Steve?
I'm right here.
Okay, Steve, the floor is yours and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Stephen Whitehouse. I live in the Shelton UGA. I conduct business in the city of Shelton. There are 3 issues here. Number 1, do we need affordable housing? Number 2, is this an appropriate site? And number 3, is this the project and the developer we want? I'm not here to discuss the first, I'm here to discuss the second two. On January 7th, 2021, I wrote a letter to Mr. Knighton with 12 inquiries, and I asked that they be responded to. I also asked that copies of that letter be delivered to the city council. I don't know if that has happened. I do know that none of my inquiries have been answered. It seems to me that when transparency got raised as an issue about a month ago, that not responding to an appropriate inquiry is not the best thing to do. I'm concerned that no one has checked out Equity Plus or their history. From what the gentleman said, it seems to me they've only conducted 3 or 4 projects. I know they're also not registered to do business in the state of Washington as they're required to do by RCW 2515-021. They are not registered with the Department of Revenue. The deal, in looking at it, I looked at it and I was trying to figure out, is this a binding agreement by everybody? And why are they calling it a development agreement? Because development agreements under the city code and under state statute can only be entered into with owners of properties, and these people don't own anything. The only thing, and I couldn't figure out the financing deal because what it says in the development agreement, it doesn't provide for any security for the monies that the city is essentially putting up. And if you actually look at item 8, 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, and 8.5, it shows you that what the developer is committing to. The developer is committing to next to nothing. There is nothing in that document that assures the city that the developer will build anything. The gentleman who spoken said, well, if they decide they aren't crazy about the deal, they can back out and the city gets the property back. Where in the agreement is that spoken? It says nothing with regard to that. The result is that the deal could be put through, they get the property, maybe they do some financing. I've heard that supposedly the monies owed to the city are going to be subordinated to any loan, but I haven't seen that in writing anywhere. But if that's the case, what happens is that if the developer who is, and you know, there's a new entity that got formed a month ago with the Secretary of State's office to put this property into, they have no assets and they could just decide to walk away. I'm also
Excuse me,
concerned.
Stephen.
Yeah.
That is your time. 3 minutes is up, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next on the list is Jenny Brush. And Jenny, you also have 3 minutes and you'll need to unmute yourself. There you go. Okay, your 3 minutes begins, Jenny.
Number one, I'm disappointed that this project isn't an in-community project, but instead of selling this gentleman or them the land, why don't we lease them the land? And then we also, in addition to property taxes, we would charge them maintenance fees and leasehold fees. So that we would have a continuous stream of revenue from this project. I don't understand. It sounds like the city's going to be putting money out for this project, and it's not, and the developer's not going to be putting money out. So I kind of don't understand the financing of this. And if the property's leased, I feel that we have more control over our property in the watersheds. Let's see, I'm sorry. Oh, and if the developer does buy the property, then I think that we should charge, the city should charge some sort of HOA fees.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Next, Donna.
Let me get my timer reset here. Okay, so next on the list is Jeff Conklin. Jeff, are you still with us? There you are.
Unmute, Jeff.
You're on mute, so you'll need to unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
Thanks very much. My name is Jeff Conklin, and I live at Island Lake. And there's been a lot said about the people of Island Lake being against this project, and that we shouldn't have anything to say about it because we're not city residents. But I will tell you that we are residents within the urban growth boundary, and we're affected by everything that the city does in terms of planning. Decisions made on the city level affect everybody that's within the urban growth boundary. And we should have some say about it because ultimately it affects all of us within that UGA boundary. So I don't know whether this is a really good idea or not because I haven't had time to look at all of the grimy details. But here's what I do think. What I do think is I don't think that we've taken the time to really analyze what's best for the city. We've got a small number of people moving this forward, and I think what needs to really be done is a group of people within the city and people who live in the UGA, no matter what side of town they happen to live on, need to come together, and we need to have this council put together an advisory group to be an advisory to this city council to take a look at the planning process or in and around this community. It's been a long time since there's been a planning commission or an advisory council to this community to say, here's where we think growth ought to happen. We need to take another look at the big picture since the Growth Management Act gave us an edict of what they thought we were supposed to do. I sat on the City Planning Commission years ago, and I wasn't exactly a friend of the developers, even though I'm a real estate broker. I threw some wrenches in some developments in this community, and Meridian Park's a fine example. There's sidewalks in Meridian Park because I held out and I created some enemies in that process. But Meridian Park's a better neighborhood because of it. But I think we need to spend some time, not hurry up. I mean, 9 months ago, there was some discussion going on, but we as a community didn't find out about this until less than 60 days ago. And that's not time to do an adequate job of planning this process. I don't know this developer. It'd be great to meet him, like to see some of his projects. I'd fly all over the country, and I offered the mayor to pay his way to let's go look at some of his stuff today. So let's take the time. Let's back off. What we're talking about is 400 housing units, 3 to 4 bedrooms. We're talking about increasing the population of the city of Shelton by 15%. That has impact. And we better think about that because it's going to haunt us all if we do it wrong.
Jeff,
yes.
that is your 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to take 15 seconds to say I'm willing to be part of that group and that advisory group to do what I can to make it work. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you, Jeff.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, the next person on my list is Keith Fuller. So Keith, will you please, we have your name, but will you state if you live within the city, in the county, or elsewhere, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Keith Fuller. I'm a managing broker with Windermere Himley, and I live just on the city outskirts in the country. And so I'm speaking today, though, on behalf of the Mason County Association of Realtors. The Mason County Association of Realtors opposes the workforce housing development project on Brockdale Road. There are several reasons for our association's opposition to this project. First is the monstrous scale of the project in relation to other developments within the city. 400 rental homes on 90 acres. For example, Springfield Park, right across the street from the proposed area there, is 20 acres. So this proposal is 4 times the size of Springfield Park. The combined total of Shelton Springs and Parsley Sage across the street from the high school is 29 acres, not counting wetlands. So this project is 3 times the size of those 2 combined subdivisions. And ditto with Meridian Park 1 and Meridian Park 2, they're on 20 acres. So this is the workforce housing project is 4 times that size. So think about the scale of this in relation to the other subdivisions and developments that are located within our city. So second,
I'd like to point out the subdivision is proposed, not subdivision, but project is on 90 acres, and it's all one thing: 3-bedroom, 2-bath modular homes. There's too little housing diversity on that substantial amount of land, too low of density on this prime real estate. Speaking of diversity, all occupants will be bringing home roughly similar amounts of income. In a market-driven setting, you would have a very diverse neighborhood with incomes that varied widely. If we learned anything in 2020, it's that diversity in all areas is critical. Workforce housing is an admirable goal, a worthy cause, and we appreciate the city has recognized this. The city could take other steps to encourage both market rate and workforce housing. Shelton has a long history of development proposals, single-family housing proposals, apartment proposals, many of which prospective developers threw their hands up at the city's demands and put their projects on the shelf. The city, for example, could update their out-of-date and somewhat archaic development regulations. Minimum lot sizes of 6,000 square feet are outdated by today's growth management standards compared to neighboring cities. Another example is 1 duplex per lot. It's an outdated policy. Parking codes as they relate to multifamily housing are another area that need change and improvement. Regarding zoning, neighborhood residential zoning is everywhere in our city. In 2009, the urban growth area zoning was made to mirror Shelton zoning code. Hundreds of additional acres, NR zoned acres, were added. Why not allow higher densities closer to transportation corridors where people can walk and not drive? There are many.
Excuse me, Keith. That is 3 minutes, sir.
3 minutes?
3 minutes.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. Let's move on. Donna?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, next we have Melanie Bacala. And Melanie, we have your name, state whether you live in the city, the county, or elsewhere, and you have 3 minutes, ma'am.
Donna, Melanie's phone dropped off. She let me know, and she will attend a future meeting.
Okay, so I will cross her off of my list. And now we have Dean McCoy. So Dean, you need to unmute yourself, and I'll lower your hand and state if you live in the city, the county, or elsewhere, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I live in the Shelton. My name is Dean McCoy, and I live in the Shelton UGA. And a couple of things I want to hit real quick is, number one, I do agree, a right idea, probably the wrong piece of land for a variety of reasons. And I also want to point out, we just heard the brochure version of what we're going to get. And I remind you, it's a brochure, like when you're shopping for a car, they show you all the bells and whistles, but reality check comes in later. So think of that when you look at the brochure. A couple of things I'm worried about is no site plan. Like, this is premature signing this agreement, as pointed out earlier. A lot of risk for our community with no risk to an LLC as they get to walk away without having assets. I just want to say I strongly object to the proposed Shelton Creek watershed project located along Brockdale Road and Island Lake Drive. I'm writing to encourage the city of Shelton to reevaluate its proposed usage of the Shelton Creek watershed property by the out-of-state corporation. If this project is approved, the city of Shelton will be giving away, obviously, a cherished public resource to a private company with minimal transparency at best. The watershed is the only remaining large open space within the city limits of Shelton. As mentioned in previous meeting, this is the crown jewel of the city's outdoor recreation space. If you currently do not consider this property a gem, it will be in a few short years. As an example, look at the cities of Boston with the Boston Common, New York's Central Park, San Francisco's Golden Gate Park, and Washington, D.C.'s National Mall to see the importance of preserving open spaces. One only needs to notice how many people use the disc golf and the Huff and Puff daily to understand the need for more outdoor recreation space within the city limits. It offers uncontaminated wilderness right in citizens' backyard. Mature trees, lack of pavement, natural walking paths in an environment that needs no artificial enhancement to make it better. There is no replacement. Once removed from the public's use, the city can never replace it, nor will it have the funding to do it. Why would we replace something that we already own? This property is not underutilized in any way, shape, or form. In fact, governments at every level are recognizing the importance of keeping green belts, parks, open spaces, wildlife corridors, and groundwater replenishing areas. Let's be ahead of the curve of most cities by preserving the cherished open space. And most importantly here, there is no cost to the city for leaving the property as a recreation area. In fact, the city's own signs posted around the watershed reads, I quote, "Protect your recreation area, report violators," unquote. Who would have imagined the citizens would have to protect this recreation area from the very government that posted the signs? This rushed approval stinks for lack of transparency and the rushness that is put forth in front of us. We may meet the letter of the law as far as open meetings and publishing it in the newspaper, but the intent appears to be that we want it quickly passed. And that's already been mentioned a little here. The character of Shelton is
Excuse me, Dean.
here. Yep.
That's 3 minutes, sir.
All right. Thank you. So let's not rush this through.
Okay.
Thank you, Dean.
Mr. Mayor, are you ready for our next one?
We are ready.
Next on the list is Todd Fagg. So Todd, if you will unmute yourself and tell us where you live, and you may begin with 3 minutes, sir.
Hi, my name is Todd Fagg. I live in the Shelton UGA, and I'm from the East Coast. And Mr. Fetcher speaks a lot of developments on the East Coast. East Coast living and West Coast living are completely different. He does not know this area, and that's evident by one of the slides where they show firefighters slash first responders salaries and that the hype that they would get it. That those salaries are incorrect of what he had posted. They make a lot more than what he's taken East Coast rates of pay. A correctional officer here is almost making as much as he had stated. Talking about a negative environmental impact. I mean, this is a watershed. Are you serious? I mean, it really, truly does not take a really smart person. And I don't mean to be like that, but I mean, seriously, a watershed. We moved here 5 years ago. It's a beautiful piece of land. And Shelton's getting ready to just hand it over. I do, with the 3 to 4 bedroom, there's a lack of 3 to 4 bedroom housing in Shelton, period. We've looked at considering selling, trying to find a 4 bedroom house, and there are very few and far between 4 bedroom houses that are in Mason County, period. Talking about fair market value, I do believe that I had read something somewhere that said someone was willing to pass the hat and come up with $2.7 million to preserve this piece of land. What I have come to learn is that this is treasured land for Shelton. It's very treasured, and you are seeing, I don't think that so far we have seen one individual in support of this. I would caution the council members on their vote on this, that you represent the people. And when the people say this is not a good idea, and you become ever so knowledgeable and say, but we know better than you, that is going to be your downfall. That is not good. No, you don't know what is necessarily better for the community. The community has spoken and said this is not a good idea. There is a lot more land in this area that something like this could be done on. That prime piece of property, absolutely not. It's too precious. It's as everybody has already said, it's a gem. It's a beautiful piece of land. It's heavily used by walkers, disc golf, and Mr. Fetcher.
Excuse me, Todd.
Mm-hmm.
That is 3 minutes, sir.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Wow. Okay. Well, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Trish, I can see that your hand is raised and I've added you to my list, so I'm going to lower your hand. And Mr. Mayor, are you ready for the next person?
Yes, please.
Next on my list is Mike Fox. So Mike, if you will, please state your name and where you live, and you may begin. You have 3 minutes.
Mike Fox, I live in the UGA on Island Lake. I was born on Island Lake. I've lived in Shelton most of my life, next to the watershed. First of all, I want to clarify a statement that I made at the last council meeting that was related to a conversation I had with Dr. Apostle related to the housing project that's proposed for the city watershed. Dr. Apostle and my conversation was related to the transparency and the lack of notice of the related project, including to the school district. And if the school district had been notified or asked for any input related to the housing project. His comment to me related strictly to that transparency and the lack of any notice to the school district, and was not any either for or against by Dr. Apostle for this housing project. That's something that is up to the school board and not Dr. Apostle. I've been asked a few times if Dr. Apostle is actually against the project. And again, I want to make clear that Dr. Apostle did not state whether he was for or against the project. He made clear the city, the school district relies upon state dollars based upon student count. And the more students they have, obviously, the more money they get and the more educational programs and things that they can do within the school. So I just want to make that clear. The gentleman refers to a handshake agreement, and there is so much to discuss about this agreement that was done with no transparency, no input by any Shelton or community members, and is being driven by unelected city staff and a few members who do not even live within Shelton or the UGA or Mason County. I still go back to the transparency of this project, how it has came about, the agreement, which I think Steve Whitehouse clearly made clear that is lacking a whole lot of details. I just, again, encourage the city council to step back. A 3-minute dissertation on a Zoom meeting, along with only being able to put in a memo how you feel about it on a city website is not transparency. It's not listening to what the citizens have to say. And I would encourage you to step back from this agreement, take time to actually have face-to-face meetings with the citizens of Shelton and the UGA that are hugely affected by this, and take that input and first decide whether the citizens of Shelton and the UGA even want this to happen on this piece of property. There's numerous other properties within Shelton that could have it without the impact that 400 houses within this 90-acre piece of property that can never be replaced. And again, something for you guys as city council members to think about. It can never be replaced by the city of Shelton once you give it away. Never be replaced. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We have another one, Donna?
I sure do, Mr. Mayor. Next on the list is Mark Kamen. I see you, Mark. So if you will state your name and where you live, and you, sir, have 3 minutes. But you have to unmute yourself first. There you go.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Kamen. I'm 5th generation, born and raised in Mason County, Shelton, went to Shelton High School. Currently living outside of the area, but own property still within the UGA and in the city limits, and as our family does. I would like to first, most of my questions are regarding Equity Plus and Mr. Fletcher and their experience and their role in the project. After doing some research on their entity and past and present projects, I'd like them to clarify how they consider, talking to us about we own it, we manage it, we are doing the development work, we're doing the construction work. In appearance, their firm mainly does the financial paperwork and securing low-income tax credits from different agencies to help offset the cost of projects. And in appearance, it doesn't look like they own any of their projects or acted as the actual developer or contractor or owner of these development communities. So when he's including himself as we, I think we need a little more clarification on what he's actually talking about. That's the main point. I just wanted everyone to really dig into that and do due diligence on what they would be actually providing. They would be responsible for developing, constructing, and operating, or as soon as the development agreement has been signed and the purchase and sale agreement, will they then be assigning it to other entities, other parties unrelated to them through partnerships to then carry on the most of the work. I think that's very important because it is a transparency thing. And it appears that it's not being as transparent as they could be. They also reference a whole bunch of projects that they completed. But even in their slideshows, if you look at what they say they've completed, and they're referencing that they completed helping secure financing or helping secure tax credits, not that they performed any substantial boots on the ground work or bringing that kind of asset to the community or to the project. The second point I wanted to talk about was mainly the need for the housing. I was on Habitat for Humanity board for a while in Shelton, as well as being a part of a different city task force back in the early 2000s about this need and other utility needs and infrastructure needs of the city. And
Excuse me, Mark.
oh,
That's
I'm
3
done.
minutes.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, our next speaker is Brent Dilly, and I don't know if he's still with us or not. Brent, are you
Yeah,
still
you
see me.
here?
You should see me. See me?
I see
Yeah, we
you.
see you.
There you are.
There we go.
Brent, if you will state your name and if you live in the city or the county or elsewhere, and you, sir, have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Brent Dilly. I'm an attorney in Olympia and been retained by a number of your citizens to speak on their behalf tonight about the proposal before you in the developer agreement. I think Mr. Whitehouse, who spoke first, eloquently pointed out a lot of the issues that my clients have with the developer agreement. And what I would simply add to that, and my clients would like to point out, is that once this developer agreement is entered into, it's according to the terms that they are now vested in the development rights. There's no time frame in which they start developing. I understand it could potentially be a phased project, but you heard tonight about your stormwater. Those regulations could change. They would still be vested under what exists on the books here in February 2021. Finally, practicing municipal law as part of my practice, and have engaged in a number of these different development agreements. Typically, perhaps one way to look at it is, if the city wants to move forward, enter into a purchase and sales agreement, and all these other requirements or contingencies can be added to the purchase and sales agreement. And if everything's met, then perhaps go forward. My clients aren't opposed to low-income housing in the city of Shelton. It's just perhaps that this project is not the right one for this particular purpose. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brent.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, next on our list is Jim Morrell, and you've heard me say it enough. You probably know exactly what you need to do, and your 3 minutes begin now, sir.
Thanks, Donna. My name is Jim Morrell. I'm the CEO for Peninsula Credit Union. I sleep in the county and spend more time in the city, as do our members across the city and county. There's been a lot of speculation for the magnitude of the need and demand related to affordable workforce housing. And so I went back to the Workforce Housing Summit report that Peninsula Credit Union organized after the summit, which took place in January of 2019. Due to economic conditions and lack of any dramatic increase in housing inventory, along with the coronavirus-caused recession, this information is likely no better than it was 2 years ago. Mason Health CEO Eric Moll shared that there are about 50 hospital district staff who live outside of Mason County. Sierra Pacific's Lisa Perry shared that 60 employees, 32% of their workforce, live outside of the county. Department of Corrections Superintendent Dan White let us know that 384 of their 637 staff, 60% at the Washington Corrections Center, just outside Shelton live outside of Mason County. Current research indicates all 3 organizations have entry-level positions that would qualify for the Shelton Workforce Housing Project. These are only 3 organizations. When you add up Little Creek casino workers, shellfish workers, school district employees, baristas, those earning SSI, Social Security, there's clearly a high demand for the size of project you are contemplating. The keynote speaker at the summit was Mike Kinsella, CEO for Up for Growth Action. Last month, Mr. Kinsella shared with me the following information about Washington's 10th congressional district. And while the city of Shelton is only one small part of that district, our data is lower than the overall district averages. Congressional District 10 underproduces homes at a rate of 1.06 units for every household formed. The desired target is 1.2 to 1.5 units. This underproduction ranks our congressional district 343rd out of 435 districts across the country. For every 2.7 jobs, there is only 1 housing unit being produced. Ideally, that ratio should be 1 to 1. That ranks our congressional district 267th out of 435 congressional districts. The 400 units that would be part of the Shelton Workforce Housing Project are very much needed. And more of our workers could thereby live closer to where they work. It would lessen the impacts of potential gas tax increases, increase sales to our local businesses and sales tax revenue to the city, and lessen the cost burden for many households, 45% of which are making $50,000 or less. I want to thank you, council members and city staff, for your efforts in addressing our community's need for affordable workforce housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Donna?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, next on the list is Mark Tucson.
Hi. I won't go into what I had written because everybody's done a better job of raising all the points I had, but I do have a question for Avram. Is how did this piece of land come to his attention? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And the last person that I have written down is Trish McCoy.
All right, can you hear me, Donna?
Yes, I can hear you, Trish.
Okay. Hi, Donna. I am Trish McCoy. I live at Island Lake, so just outside of the city limits. I work in the city of Shelton, and I have a few questions, and so I don't really want to be repetitive, but why would we go outside of Shelton area to have somebody build housing for us? Why did this company become an LLC on the last day of the year when they've been meeting since April of 2020? How do we have evidence of these developments that he's done if they just became an LLC on the last day of 2020? I'm going to kind of skip through some of what I had prepared. My other thing is I'm really worried about the school district, 400 homes, minimum 2 kids per home. That's a lot of kids school district with. And then I'll go into what I had prepared. Oh, the last thing I want to say is Jeff Knighton claims he's worked with the school district as he's gone through this, whatever this proposal, yet our superintendent didn't know anything about it. A certain group of people don't want this housing development, that this Island Lake group shouldn't have a voice because we don't live within the city limits. Well, I have lived in the city limits of Shelton at different times throughout my life as a renter and as a owner. I started my family living in the city and didn't move back to Island Lake until 2012. I'm a public employee for the Shelton School District, and my address is Shelton, Washington. I'm going to skip that. It's true, we need housing. Look at Zillow, along with most communities. We're low on all kinds of housing, market rate housing, upper end housing. And yes, we need some rentals, but not all in one spot. Spread them out, give people an opportunity to be owners, have a few rentals interspersed amongst market rate housing. As a teacher, when we divide kids up for next year's group, we balance the kids through academic ability, behavior, boy, girl, several other factors that go into the equation. There's a reason. If we put all of one ability together, they naturally learn from each other and perform to those abilities. So if you put high kids together, inevitably, they're going to perform high. If you put low kids together, inevitably, they're going to perform low. When we mix kids, they're exposed to the abilities of others. They act as role models. I look at what you are proposing through an educator's lens. Let's create housing for all walks of life, not just low income. One final note, no, everybody's talked about it being the green space. My kids do a lot of exploring and science experiments there. I was going to talk about that. But I'm going to end with the city of Shelton has posted signs throughout the watershed that says no smoking, no fires, protect your recreation area, report violators. These signs are posted on Island Lake Drive. The very people who ordered to have the signs posted are now trying to destroy our precious watershed. I'm reporting very loudly, 426-4441. I'm reporting the violators. Please stop. We want to protect our recreation area.
Trish,
Thanks. I'm done.
that's 3 minutes. Thank
Good to
you.
see you, Donna.
You too. And I see, Mr. Mayor, I see another gentleman with his hand up. Ed, is it pronounced Ryder?
No, it was
Ed?
not.
Ed?
No, it wasn't.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
it is. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. So if you will tell us
Okay.
where you live, and sir, you have 3 minutes.
All right, my name's Ed Ryder. I live in the Agate area. I'm new to the Zoom, so I apologize for that. Everybody that talked, save the Peninsula Credit gentleman, seems to be opposed. And my initial response to all this was opposition as well. It seems that holding a Zoom meeting in a pandemic is a pretty bad way to get big input on a huge project. That sounds like they want, the developer wants a contract pretty much right away. And then once you're in that, you've given it away. I guess that's my only comment, that the area has other folks that could certainly develop, per the market needs. And you don't need an East Coaster coming in and taking the rents in perpetuity. If indeed these are all to be rentals, I don't believe these are rent for purchase. I think these are all rentals in perpetuity for the benefit of the gentleman from the East Coast. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Ed?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, let me scan these 3 screens here and see if I see anyone else. And no, Mr. Mayor, I don't see anyone else who would like to make a public comment.
All right. Let's see what we got here. We got 7:42. Okay. At this time, we're going to recess from our regular meeting to open a public hearing. City Engineer Ken Gill has information for us about adopting the Department of Ecology's 2019 Stormwater Manual.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I could, before our city engineer gets started, just
Sure.
to let everybody know on the Zoom call or watching the meeting tonight, that the next time this topic will come up is tentatively scheduled for March 16th. But we will make sure that everybody is aware when that happens, and when we write it in pen rather than in pencil. But right now, that's what we're looking at, is March 16th.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Okay, Ken?
Good evening, council. It's raining outside, so we're going to talk about stormwater. It's good to see all of your smiling faces on Zoom. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen with you. And you should be looking at a blue slide that talks about stormwater and a 2019 stormwater manual. So tonight we're going to talk about, get this little thing rolling. It's a little rusty. Here we go. What is a stormwater management manual? Kind of what we use now, and why we want to use the 2019 version. So the stormwater management manual gives guidance on how to control the quantity and quality of stormwater. And this is Ecology's definition. My definition is that make sure you don't flood out your neighbors. And when we discharge stormwater from our streets, our houses, our rooftops and driveways, it goes back into our streams so that you can swim in it and with your kids and play in it. And it's a resource for our fish and for our residents. So this is the cover of the manual. It's a lot thicker than that if you print it out, but it's only online anymore. But that's what it looks like. So the reason why this is so important is Shelton has a big resource. You know, a lot of cities, communities in Western Washington do not have. This is this picture that was shared by me with my friend Erica Marblett with the Squaxin and Tribe, but these are some juvenile coho. So these are in Goldsboro Creek. This is a chum salmon that these are also in Goldsboro Creek. So you can see that one getting ready to spawn. The Stormwater Manual has 5 volumes. I'm only going to talk briefly about one tonight. But what the most common question I get here at the City of Shelton is, what do I got to do for stormwater to develop my new single family house, my new commercial lot? What is that? So the Ecology Manual answers those questions really in 2 charts. And they got 2. And I don't read this one. It'll make you kind of cross-eyed and give you a headache. At least it does for me. But basically, they got one for a redevelopment site. That's if you've already got something on it. And the big trigger in there is about 5,000 square feet. And if you spend about half of the value of the assessed value. So they also got one for new development. And these stormwater regulations get about 5,000 square feet. So that's kind of the basics of how it works. A lot of what's driving this is our Western Washington Phase 2 permit. We talked a little bit about this during my last stormwater presentation, but this is a permit that is new for Shelton. We're a new permittee. Other cities have had it for a little while, but we're just getting it underway. Adopting this new manual allows us to meet this permit requirement. I've copied it from the permit, so you don't have to read the permit. But using this manual allows us to check a box on that permit and say, yep, we're in compliance. We got a little time to do it. So you could say we're getting started early. So we really don't have to do it for almost a couple years now. But one of the reasons why we're doing it now is that a lot of the development that's going on around us is using it. Here's an example. Many of you have been out to the YMCA and seen the improvements that they've done to our existing storm pond out on Wallace Neeland. So Wallace Neeland is a big infiltration pond, just grass, rocks. They've came in, excavated out some soil, brought in some topsoil, plant some camas bulbs, and are repurposing that to clean up the water before it goes into the ground, into our aquifer that feeds our streams. That one particular feeds Shelton Springs. That used to be a former water source for us. So the other folks that are using it we have a couple industrial permittees. Sierra Pacific, they have a industrial stormwater discharge permit. It's real similar to ours, but a few different things. So this is the cover of our stormwater management plan. They have a stormwater pollution prevention plan that Lisa Perry shared with me, and talks about how but with their permit, they'll be using this current manual now too. The Shelton School District, we talked about last time. I showed you some pictures of their retrofitting their parking lot. They're using this manual to design infiltration trenches on site to make sure that the stormwater goes into the ground rather than make puddles in the parking lot or puddles in Shelton Springs Road. So they're using it to take a site that was designed and built under the current regulations when it was done, which were very minimal, and make it all work. So this is my last slide, but I kind of want to leave you with a cool project that, again, has been using the design equations and things in this new manual. It's some rain gardens that Mason County Conservation District's been building up on Turner Avenue. So this is one that isn't planted yet, but they're side by side. You get the gray house and the blue house, but they've dug a depression, routed the downspouts to them. That's what you see in the picture here on this timber trellis, and they've got an overflow area. So they're using that to infiltrate their stormwater instead of trying to flood out their neighbors or sending it down the trail that was built by a Corps of Volunteers in 1997. Anybody have ever walked up that? So with that, that's all I've got in my presentation, but I recommend that you move it on to the next council meeting for a first read. That's it.
All right, thank you, Ken. Donna, has anybody signed up for testimony?
Oops, I'm on mute. Let me check.
All right.
First, I'm gonna stop sharing Ken's screen so that I can see people. I can see Councilmember Schmidt has his hand up, and that's all that I can see.
Okay, Joe.
What, no public comment on the stormwater management manual? Come on.
Oh, geez, I know, nobody, nothing. I feel just ripped off. I just, wow.
All right, I'll bother you a little bit here. You talked about SWIP plans. Are we then going to be requiring that industry under the city's permit create SWIP plans?
Yes and no. Okay.
Okay.
So here's why it's yes. We have a public works yard at 1000 West Pine. Okay. So we have to create a stormwater pollution prevention plan. So we manage the greases and the oils that Kaylin uses in our vehicles, the fueling station out there, the storage of our rocks and our sand, making sure that it's not going into our spring-fed pond out there. So we have to create that in the next upcoming couple years. It's on the, we've got to do it. No, with respect to like Sierra Pacific, that's a different permit that Ecology manages. Ecology manages them. We don't manage them. Okay, so they have what's called an industrial discharge permit. So it's different requirements than ours. It's been around a lot longer than ours, and just different playing field. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I've heard in the past that under the phase 2 permitting, some industrial areas that that potentially have runoff onto city rights of way are required to do SWIP plans and be inspected annually by the city, et cetera. I've heard of that sort of thing, and I'm just curious if that is a path we're going down, because as we've learned, we want to be communicating that with our partners as soon as possible.
So a program that I implemented and had a lot of fun doing was a credit program. So you guys talked a little bit about that. And the whole key of any stormwater device at all is to make sure that it's maintained, right? So giving a credit for good maintenance is like a carrot, right? And the key is to make sure that that amount of credit pays for the amount of maintenance. The other key is to inspect, right? So as part of this permit, John Gilarducci talked about inspecting sites post-construction after they're all done, right? So let's say that you built you work for WashDOTs and you ask the question, so I get to use you as an example. So a new WashDOT maintenance yard in Shelton, right? You're gonna shorten your commute, right? And it's got all kinds of equipment and graders and all kinds of stuff. They build a big stormwater pond that outfalls into us. And you say, hey, I want a credit because I maintain this on my stormwater utility. And we say, sure, no problem. Let's come out and inspect your stormwater facility, make sure that you're maintaining it in the way that you designed it. So that's not on the books right now, but that's how other cities are manage that requirement of their permit to inspect things after they've been constructed to make sure they're working. Does that answer your question?
Answers my question, yeah, and well done. Yeah, totally clarified that. So thank you, appreciate it.
Okay.
Mayor, can I make a motion to extend this meeting for 30 minutes?
Been a motion to extend the meeting for 30 minutes.
Second.
There's a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Eric. All right, was there anybody for public comment on this?
Kathy's got her hand up. And
I
Jeff.
have my
Got her
hand
hand
up.
up.
Hi, Kevin. Hey, Ken, how are you?
Good to see you.
Yeah, so I love the rain gardens and I love all the natural things that will kind of be in place of the ugly graded storm drains that we have around town. And so my thumbs up on incentives, credits, whatever we need to do to encourage people to put these in when they build.
Okay. So the stormwater manual that we're talking about adopting designs those, the rain gardens, the bioswales, the planted things. It doesn't do any credits. That's I'm getting ahead of myself. So the FCS group will talk about that a little bit at your next presentation.
Okay.
So, but the stormwater manual is the tool that engineers use to design what you're describing.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, Donna, we seem to have a public comment from Mr. Neely. Jeff, you're unmuted.
You do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Jeff Neely. I'm a property owner, a businessman, and own 3 commercial properties in the city of Shelton. My question is, especially when this topic comes up, it's really kind of right on a touchy nerve, but my question is when the city is building city roads, when this agreement goes into effect, will that also hold the city accountable to put the roads in so that they're not dumping water on private citizens' properties? That's for Ken.
All right.
Okay. So Jeff, I'm gonna rephrase the question and make sure that I understood it.
Okay.
So your question is, if the city adopts this manual, will we have to use it to design the stormwater facilities for our own public works projects?
Correct.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And
my question is that in the rules at this point in time, given point in time? Ken, you may not recognize me, but you and I have met. I have water flowing onto my private property from a city street. I've discussed it for now close to 2 years and still am not finding any resolve. So it's a great topic to come up, as I've had the conversation over this earlier today and multiple times in the past.
so now I recognize your face. You own the business out by Les Schwab, right?
I do.
Yep. So we have designed a fix for that, and we're in the process of implementing it. So look for some gravel ditches but we'd love to spend more time talking about that and talking about that Madison K, right? That's where you're at?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'd like to have some more time. I know this probably isn't the place, but the fix of running the water across another piece of private property to fix my problem and then passing it on to that private owner when he goes to develop, I don't think that's a fix. I really don't. And I think there needs to be something addressed within the ordinances or whatever to adjust this, because it's not going to be fair to fix my problem and dump it onto another private property owner.
Well, let's meet on site like we did before, and I'm happy to show you what we've got proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, let's have Mr. Neely meet with Mr. Gill in a meeting. So thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right. Donna, can you give me the first reading of ordinance number 1965-0121?
Yes, ordinance number 1965-0121, an ordinance of the city of Shelton, Washington, amending Shelton Municipal Code, section 13.02.130.a, adopting the Department of Ecology's 2019 Stormwater Management Manual.
All right, do we have a motion?
I move to forward ordinance number 1965-0121 to the action agenda for council meeting on February 16th.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to forward ordinance number 1965-0121 to action agenda for the council meeting on February 16th. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Public hearing is closed and we'll resume our regular meeting.
Thank you very much.
The first action item presented by Community Development Director Mark Ziegler has to do with the Civic Center rotating art gallery recommendations. Mark?
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, members of the public. I'm pleased to bring to you tonight the latest recommendations from the Shelton Arts Commission for the rotating art gallery in the Shelton Civic Center. The Arts Commission, City of Shelton called for artists to submit work by January 8th of 2021. We received one artist proposal by the deadline, and the Arts Commission met on January 12th to jury that work. And that one artist is being presented to you tonight for approval. Deborah Singer has 5 pieces, and they're all photography is the medium. And I think you have those in your packet to review. With your approval tonight, the Arts Commission will install by February 23rd, and those will be in place through May 31st. And with the ongoing pandemic and the Civic Center closure, Mary Ricker, our communications specialist, and Jordan Crumples, our recreation coordinator, doing a great job getting recognition for these artists out through social media platforms and the press. So we're doing our best to recognize these artists and get them some recognition. Although we're not allowing the general public into the Civic Center on a regular basis right now.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Public comment, Donna?
Now I only have 2 screens to look at. Let me make sure. No, Mr. Mayor, there is no one for public comments.
All right, how about a motion?
I move to approve the Shelton Art Commission recommendations for placement in the Civic Center rotating art gallery.
All right, thank you.
I'll second that.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve Shelton Arts Commission's recommendations for placement in the Civic Center rotating art gallery. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Finance Director Aaron B. Miller has information for us regarding a 2020 supplemental budget.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Deputy Mayor, council members. Before you today is a 2020 supplemental budget. This adds budget to 2 of our funds, the bond fund and the sewer fund. And in both cases, we are adding budget so that we can run the bond refunding through our books as is required by accounting rules. This was, of course, heard on the January 19th council meeting, and there have been no changes since then. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
One signed up for public comment here.
No, there isn't, Mr. Mayor.
All right, do we have a motion?
I move that we approve ordinance number 1964-0121, amending the city's 2020 budget as presented.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Can you give us a second reading, Donna, of ordinance number 1964-0121?
Yes. Ordinance number 1964-0121, an ordinance of the City of Shelton, Washington, amending the annual budget for the year ending December 31st, 2020.
Okay. Any questions from the council? See any hands up?
Appreciation. It's again, great work on the bond refunding, and thanks for keeping us on the up and up.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 1964-0121, amending the city's 2020 budget as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, the last item on the action agenda is a resolution for on-call qualified pool contracts. Public Works Director Jay Harris has the details.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, and members of the public. Jay Harris, your Public Works Director. So we have a need for a qualified pool list of architectural and engineering consultants to assist the city on projects. And what happens is the state requires that they're all qualification based first. We don't base the selection on price. So we go through a two-step process. We get the most qualified consultant, and then we negotiate price. If we can't come to a price, then we go on to the next consultant. And so what we're doing through the pool list we have submitted a request for proposals, received all them, rated them, and came up with a qualified pool list for street projects, water projects, master planning, architectural, landscaping, geotechnical, those sorts of things. So we have a list of consultants that we don't have to go through the qualification base because we've already determined they're qualified. And now we just will work on, when we have a project coming up, negotiate the price with the consultant. And so it takes a step out of the process. Any larger projects will still be coming back to council. Council in the past had been seeing this qualified base selection. So in the future, you'll be seeing these consultants to issue the contracts for larger contracts. So you guys will be seeing those. So we have 13 firms on the qualified pool list. Some have multiple categories, and there has been no changes since my last presentation.
All right. Do we have any public comment, Donna?
Let me check here, Mr. Mayor. No, we do not.
All right. Will you give us a reading on resolution number 1183-1120?
Yes. Resolution number 1183-1120, a resolution of the Council of the City of Shelton, Washington, authorizing the city manager to enter into architecture and engineering services agreements with multiple consultants for the on-call qualified pool list.
Oop, did I skip a spot? Do we have a motion?
I move to adopt resolution number 1183-1120, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into architecture and engineering services agreements with multiple consultants for the on-call qualified pool list.
All right, thank you.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We got any questions from the council? Or comments? All right, seeing none. We have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 1183-1120, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into architecture and engineering services agreements with multiple consultants for the on-call qualified pool list. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're going to move on to administrative reports. Jeff, will you give us your city manager report, please?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and members of council. Not too much to report, but we did start our vaccination program over the last weekend. And I am very thankful for that. We are getting started across the community, and although it's a small step, it's a very important one, and that'll be begin to accelerate as we move through the rest of the spring and the summer. And I really want to thank our partners at Mason County Public Health and at our hospital system. That it will be great to see the tail end of this thing. So the other thing I just wanted to go through very quickly is the looking ahead agenda for our next meeting on February 16th. And that includes the second part of the stormwater rate presentation that you heard. First part you heard earlier this morning. So earlier this evening. I'm still drinking coffee, so it feels like morning. That you heard earlier this evening, and then we'll also have a presentation regarding the Veterans Village project that council adopted almost 2 years ago now. And the public hearing on the building codes, this is the one that was going back and forth a little bit with the State Building Code Council extending the deadline and then the governor overriding it. So everybody's trying to play a little bit of catch up. But that will occur on the 16th. And then we'll also talk about the a memorandum of understanding regarding the skate park. And then finally, you'll have the second reading on the stormwater manual item that you heard earlier tonight. And with that, that's all I have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
All right. Any questions for Jeff or new items for discussion?
Just one item to share with the council, and I'm sure everybody's aware, but just wanted to share excitement. The YMCA is very close to opening. March 1st is coming before we know it. So good times. Excited to see that. Excited to cut the ribbon on that. That'll be awesome. Looking forward to it.
All right. Anyone else? All right. And this meeting is, our next meeting will be Tuesday, February 16th, 2021 at 6 o'clock. This meeting is adjourned at 8:10.